Okay, let's open the floor for questions now. Who will go first? I think the Netherlands is a very interesting case for Finland because outside of the Nordic countries, I would claim the Netherlands being the most Nordic country when it comes to the people and the society. So it's a good place to compare things compared to many other places. So start from here and then continue.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I still come back to the response rates because what I think is that people answer the surveys when they trust each other, when they trust other and trust the institutions. And did you see difference between your groups in response rates, kind of as regards to kind of how much do you trust them, they trust back, and perhaps there is a difference in response rates, or is there?
I've just looked at the response rates yesterday, actually. And so far, we don't see any difference in response rates across groups for the midline survey. So across all groups, response rates vary between 78 and 82%.
Thank you. A really interesting presentation. So, probably I don't know if I missed it, but so can you say a few words about the target population? So, basically, these are rather similar to what we have in Finland.
I think a huge difference. I'm not too familiar with your social security system, to be honest. The people we are experimenting with are people who are not eligible for unemployment benefits anymore. So usually you are eligible for, on average, 2 years of unemployment benefits. Very much depends on your previous job, on your labor market history. And once you're not eligible for unemployment benefits anymore, or maybe you've never been eligible for unemployment benefits because you just finished your education, then this is kind of the benefit of last resort. So that's the target population we are talking about.
I think it sounds pretty similar, actually.
Okay.
There's always an unemployment benefit in Finland, but yeah, it sounds pretty similar. Also, the sample size, I don't know if you mentioned it, just to get an idea of, and I will just make a comment. You said up to €100 bonus in the incentives group for finding a job. In the Finnish one, it was up to €560 bonus. And no effect, obviously it's all bundled together, but your design is beautiful in the sense of giving an example of how to use multiple treatment groups. Hopefully in Finland in the future we can do that. But so the incentives is 560 and we don't see anything, so don't expect too much regarding the incentives.
No, we are aware of power problems in our case. And we very much hope that we will be able to circumvent those problems by doing the national evaluation. Because, for example, all these treatment groups where you can earn on top of your benefits, they are quite comparable. You don't have a problem of having different ways of carrying out a scheme. It's just a financial thing. You receive the €200 if you're part of the group or not. So that will be very comparable on the national level, and we hope that we can do something with this. I totally agree with you that €200 a month is quite a small financial incentive. And if you look at the first plans of experimentation, this incentive was much larger. So this is I've said we've been through 2 years of negotiations with the national government, and our experimental design had to change quite a lot in response to that, to be able to experiment at all. So this €200 cap was something we had to implement in order to be able to experiment.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to focus on the negatives. It's beautiful that you're able to do it. Do you have a sense that once the experiments are over and you have the results, that it might have an impact on policy reforms?
It's very much hard for me to judge. Also, I've only been living in the Netherlands for 4.5 years now, so I'm still struggling to understand how policymaking works in that country. What I think, what we can expect is a larger impact on the local level. Because of decentralization, local governments, local authorities, they have quite some responsibilities, quite some power when it comes to carrying out the scheme. And I think that the results might have quite an impact on how they do things, how they will do things in the future. And I think the impact on really policy making on the national level, this might take some time. Because obviously this has to be negotiated in Parliament and go through different rounds. And I don't know about that, but I'm more optimistic about changes on the local level. Yeah.
Okay.
One question is, the question is related to the trust, and you have very high answering percents, if I understood right, and activity in certain groups. How you combine this that you have only voluntary-based people? And what is the effects on that, the activity to answer, if you are voluntary? And in our case, that wasn't the situation.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That's a huge difference between what we are doing and what you are doing. That in our case, people actively signed up to be part of this.
And we might expect that they already trust. They trust it higher level than in our cases.
That could be, but still we have control and treatment groups. So we are still comparing groups within that group of people who actively signed up. So it's not that we compare the people who signed up to those who did not sign up, but we compare people with each other among the group of people who actively joined those experiments.
At the back of the row.
I think I have a more question for Otto, because we didn't have a chance for questions after his presentation. And one thing that I'm noticing is that we talk about experiments and we say, yeah, it was randomized, and we believe that randomization is the medicine for all the troubles that come with the experiment, which is not the case. It's actually far from the case. Up to this moment, I haven't been able to get a document into my hands which would explain clearly how the randomization was done within Finland. I had a little conversation with Timo during the coffee break. He explained how they have done the randomization, but I don't know anything how randomization was done in Finland. And this is actually the most important information if we want to make any kind of claims, like whatever we've seen today. We talk a lot about it's statistically significant, it's not statistically significant. These things don't say much if we don't know how effectively the design of experiment was done, if we don't know the methodology based on which the participant was selected in a treated group and who are those that were selected in the control group. So one of the things, the criticism in media might be coming also out of lack of the transparency of how the experiment in Finland was actually designed. Because all what is said, it was randomized, and was there a block design? We don't know. If it was, in which way, we don't know. So for me, as someone coming from the statistical field, from the expertise of causality, it's looking at these results like, yeah, but it could also be that way or that way, particularly because we're also talking of such a small samples. In this kind of situation, things can get terribly wrong. And on the top of it, we haven't also heard anything about the analytical methods to be used. Like what we just heard, yeah, we've done the regression, okay, but how did you make sure that there is a comparability between the treated and control group before you done the regression? How balanced these groups are? Are they sufficiently balanced that we can reliably apply regression and trust the results? And I wonder, why there is no such a documentation, because according to the protocols, every experiment should have a protocol before even the randomization is done. We should know before how the units will be selected, and we should know before about the methods that will be used to analyze it, because otherwise it's kind of like a, tell me what you want and I will provide you those results. You know that statistics it's a very sensitive science, and lots of things can be terribly manipulated, and lots of it also very unconsciously. Lots of results that we've seen today, I think we also wouldn't really need to do an experiment to predict that this will be some of the results. There's been lots of scientific research done before that would actually confirm those things. So my question to the doctor is there a document that explains explicitly how the randomization was done and how the balance between control and treated groups were assessed, and so that I can see how much I can really trust what we've seen today?
Before we let author or other researchers from Kela to answer these important questions, let me just check if we have other questions to Timo, or if we can release him to join the audience.
I think he's a good discussant in this thing also, if we are comparing
sitting
things.
down there.
So let's thank Timo and then continue with the question.
Yeah, so very good question. So I think Miska can give more details, but I think right before the experiment, the code was published on the Kela homepage. I think so. Yes.
It's not all about the code, you know.
No, and I'm giving you the answer. So the code was published, and so it was a random, just a random sample from around 200,000. Population of 2,000 people randomized using SAS, randomized command or something like this. And so the balance tables, I had it there, but I kind of rushed through it. And so basically, we published...
Regarding randomization, was there a block design?
No.
Okay, that's a huge weakness, particularly if you have such a small sample. And what they are doing in the Netherlands, they are using the block design.
Yes, there was no block design. And so I showed around 12 to 15 background variables, and there is one that shows a significant difference between the two. But you know, it's a random sample and looks like a random sample should. And we published that in some tables in February, and now 2 days ago published some more in terms of pre-treatment tests. But maybe Miska can comment on there's nothing really to... If you have any, yeah, that's the design.
So there is no document that there would be the whole methodology of how the sampling was done, including the protocol of how the experiment will be also analyzed. So it was by the feeling, or...
Like,
that's my impression based on going through all the documentation that exists, which was kind of worrying to me. And it's not then surprising that there is this negative media coverage if things are not transparent from the statistical methodological part of view, how things are done.
Yeah, so the code was published, and now with the reports, obviously we're always mentioning non-block design randomization, and we're doing the balance test. So I'm a little bit confused. Like, what more you expect?
And the balancing, how was done the balancing between the groups?
How the test was done?
How did you assure that the control and treated group are comparable?
Yeah, so we just run t-tests on background variables.
On each separately?
Yes.
And not all combined?
Like
And
a t-test of the difference in means.
I think we give Miska a chance to give a reply, and then this is going a very scientific, and we're not.
True, but it's
we
also...
would not like to make this a scientific conference type of event, but we totally understand your point, and it's very relevant, and but we can really answer fully within this audience.
I wouldn't be raising all of this if that material will be available already. And I've been asking questions about it. Also, Ollie, he's not here anymore. And up to now, 2 years later, there's still no documentation available, which is a bit disturbing, this kind of situation, you know, that you don't know then what to trust.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just quickly comment the process because you were critical on the design phase and how the plans have been kind of set out and published. So of course, yes, it would have been good, or we should have followed the general protocols on randomized experiments, and that is what has been tried to do here most of the time. But the problem is that the research design comes from the legislation, and the process of setting out the experiment was made in such a tight timetable that in practice and many of the relevant decisions that would have been needed in order to make, for example, the protocol paper were set out just before the experiment basically started. So the researchers are coming into the process this time in a later phase of the experiment. So the decision makers set out the design that comes from the legislation. The legislation is the main document for the design. Unfortunately, it's not available in English, and after
So
that,
I can do.
yeah.
There are translating tools today. So.
Yeah. So that's basically where the design is set out, and now of course, we are doing the analysis of the balance and what we got, unfortunately afterwards. But that's how it goes this time. It would be good to try to think. Well, if you are going to make new experiments in Finland, the process should be probably done a little bit differently. For example, how would I say, writing down the protocol before the decision on the experiment is done in the parliament. That's not maybe possible when doing this at the level of national politics, but writing down the protocol before the final decision, and then so that the criticism that comes for the protocol can be included in the design in the legislation. So. Yeah, I hope.
From this perspective, scientifically, any of these results cannot be trustworthy. Let's put aside the design that comes based on the legislation. I'm focused only on the statistical methodological part, and let's put aside that intervention that that the lady here mentioned before. So, based on what you just said, scientifically, we can't even trust anything that came out of it, because. If you know, in statistics, it's all based on what data you are collecting. So if you cannot trust the design from the statistical perspective, how can you then trust the results coming out?
Well, the data and the methodology, the research design and the main outcomes were set out in the legislation and defined more clearly in a pre-analysis plan that was registered before the evaluation project started, before anyone got the data. So that's basically our base here on the back line for making reliable analysis.
So,
I hope I.
was there another comment from Minna? No? Yes? So this is totally getting to the topic or the headline of this seminar, Science Meets Social Security Reform. So it really seems that it's difficult to make science and policy making meet. We've learned that in the Netherlands there were a lot of compromises to be done, but still you were somewhat happy. We had to do a lot of compromises also here in Finland. We've been somewhat happy. We've heard a very critical note here, but let's hear what Minna has to add.
Thank you. This is a very, very interesting discussion, and but I don't fully agree with your distrust towards the scientific results of the research. Being a member of the research group, I would say that you can trust the research we are doing. The survey came actually. What was decided in the beginning of the experiment, or before the experiment, when the law was accepted, was that there's going to be a register-based analysis. About the survey, the decision was made actually in the summer of 2018. So about actually the evaluation project, about the evaluation research, the decision was made in the summer of 2018. So I think that's something that cannot be kind of put onto the shoulders of the researchers. We've done the best we could done in these circumstances, but I would recommend the political decision makers that in the future, when it's decided that there's going to be an experiment, there's have to be a decision about the evaluation also at that point, so that the researchers can be there from the beginning. Not a different research. There was a research group that who is now evaluating the research is a different research group. So I would say this is one kind of restriction in the experiment.
I would suggest that we move on to give a chance for other people also to comment or ask questions about what we've discussed today.
Thank you. I was actually wondering, would have been interested in hearing somewhat more about the samples in the Dutch case, because there were many groups, as far as I understand, and as compared to the number of people taking part in each city. How can you say something about the figures? How is the sample or the figures? How are they is it distributed among these different groups? Are they equally large, or how does it look? Or was this only were you talking only about the experiment group here? Are the others in addition to this, or how does it look?
No, the figures I mentioned concerns either with group I meant one of the four groups, and if I spoke about total size I meant all four groups combined. It varies very much between cities, because also the population of social welfare recipients differs a lot between cities. So in Utrecht we were able to attract 750 people in total to join. So we randomized around 180 people per group. In some cities it's 200 per group, in some cities it's 150 per group. It differs very much between city, but it's in any case randomization is done in a way that the people who signed up to participate are equally randomized across the groups that are present in that city.
Okay, and these other groups with some kind of treatment, in addition to the one that you are mostly interested in as researchers, how about participation there? Was it also voluntary, or I wasn't quite sure?
So people could sign up for joining the experiments. They were then filling in a baseline survey. They were then randomized across the groups and informed which group they ended up with. And we did not, so far we do not see, we do see some dropouts of the experiment, but that is not systematic in the sense that it's almost equally distributed across the groups. So at this moment we do not think that receiving a specific kind of treatment causes people to drop out to a larger or smaller extent.
That's not very interesting. Just
and this what I'm saying now is for Utrecht, because the stuff I'm claiming about the design, I know a lot about the design about other cities. I do know less about their data. So at least in Utrecht we don't see these large differences between the groups.
Okay. No, that's very interesting to know. It was just because I came to wonder during your presentation. but as all the discussion here shows, I mean, one of the challenges with doing these kinds of experiments is exactly the combination of making politics and research, as we all are very well aware. But to what extent? No, let's just leave it there. But thank you very much for the answer.
Okay, for the last question, yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was wondering, I really very much enjoyed your presentation and the clarity of it, so thank you very much for it. I was wondering about the intensive support given and the tailor-made support. What did it actually entail, and what kind of professional background did the people who gave this support had?
Yeah, so that differs a bit between the cities, because also the welfare agencies are a bit organized a bit differently between cities. I mean, you can imagine if executing the scheme is a local responsibility, then also you have different flavors across cities. So what I'm explaining now is for the Utrecht case. So how is it done in Utrecht? The people doing the intensive treatment there are the caseworkers of the welfare agency. It's a group of dedicated caseworkers, so a group of caseworkers that have been selected to do the intensive treatment. They've received a bit of extra training, and they're following a new kind of work instruction on how to approach people and deal with people. And one of that instruction is applying a methodology that is called UCEL or UCEL methodology. It's a methodology that is often used in providing mental health care services, where you start a first conversation by mapping supporting and non-supporting factors in people's lives. And that's usually done with building blocks. So people can build a house with a building block, or not a house, but they can build something that is important in their life with blocks, and then they can use pillars to kind of visualize their support pillars, and then something that's coming from some heavy, some hindering factors. And they use this methodology in this as a starting point to see what kind of services might help people, and then try to start a more intense contact with those people and applying those services. And that's also why we see in the graph that I showed you an increase in contact moments, because there's much more contact between the dedicated counselors and the welfare recipients in that group. So that's kind of trying to explain the group in a nutshell. There are some more aspects to it, but I think this would be too extensive for this setting. But if you're interested, I mean, I'm happy to share more insights in the break. Yeah.
Thank you. We have now come to the end of the seminar. So I'd like to thank the audience here in Helsinki at the Kela main building. I'd also like to thank our online audience and remind you to stay tuned, so there will be more results as you have learned, and definitely more results about the second year, which we haven't even had the chance to take a look into. So that will be equally, if not even more interesting, what we have learned today. So thank you and stay tuned.